Imagine a world utterly unlike our own, a planet cloaked in a deep silent blue, where the very concept of a forest or a bustling city would be an unimaginable dream. For an immense span of time, stretching back billions of years into Earth's earliest history, this was the prevailing reality. Our planet, then a watery realm, was home to life, certainly, but life of a profoundly different nature. For nearly 3 billion years, from approximately 3.8 billion years ago until just a few hundred million years before the present, the oceans were the exclusive domain of microscopic organisms. These were the earliest microbes, tiny, single-celled entities that represented the pioneering architects of life. They formed vast, undulating mats across the seafloor, shimmering carpets of bacteria and archaea, patiently photosynthesizing or drawing energy from chemical reactions in the water. This was an era of quiet, incremental change, where evolution unfolded at a glacial pace, slowly refining the fundamental machinery of cells. This ancient Earth knew no vibrant green landscapes, no soaring birds, no complex movements. The dominant life forms were often invisible to the naked eye, thriving in a world devoid of the intricate food webs and dynamic interactions we associate with modern ecosystems. Picture the deepest parts of the modern ocean, but extend that quiet, dark stillness across the entire globe, and then strip away almost all the larger, more complex inhabitants. That's a closer approximation of these early eons. The water itself was the medium of life, carrying dissolved minerals and simple organic compounds, which these earliest organisms absorbed directly, without the need for mouths or digestive systems. Their existence was a testament to simplicity and endurance, a delicate balance maintained over timescales that dwarf human comprehension. Then, roughly 635 million years ago, after a series of extreme global glaciations known as snowball Earth events, where the planet was encased in ice from poles to equator, the world began to thaw. As the ice retreated and conditions stabilized, a new chapter in life's story slowly began to unfold. Out of the microbial depths emerged something slightly more complex, the Ediacaran biota. These were the first widespread multicellular organisms, and they were truly strange, almost alien in their forms. Unlike anything alive today, they often resembled quilted mattresses, frond-like structures anchored to the seafloor, or simple, disc-shaped organisms that lay flat on the muddy bottoms. Imagine vast underwater gardens, not of swaying kelp or coral, but of soft, immobile forms, gently rippling with the currents. These Ediacaran creatures, which flourished between approximately 635 and 541 million years ago, were largely sessile, meaning they were fixed in one place, unable to move freely. They were not hunters, nor were they actively hunted. Their primary mode of sustenance involved filter feeding, passively straining tiny particles from the water, or perhaps absorbing nutrients directly through their extensive surface areas. Life was a slow, deliberate affair. There was no need for speed, no requirement for complex navigation, and crucially, no urgent pressure to escape a pursuing predator. Their world was one of gentle flows and nutrient diffusion, a peaceful coexistence where competition, if it existed, was a subtle, unhurried affair for space on the seafloor or access to the best currents. Consider the profound implications of such a world without predators. This meant there was no evolutionary arms race driving the development of defenses. There were no hard skeletons, internal or external, because armor was simply unnecessary. Why invest precious energy and resources into building a protective shell if nothing is trying to crack you open. Consequently, there were also no specialized tools for offense, no sharp teeth, no powerful claws, no venomous stingers. The very concept of predation, as we understand it, where one animal actively pursues and consumes another, was largely absent from the Ediacaran seas. This lack of a predator-prey dynamic kept life simple, soft, and relatively uniform in its basic structure. Furthermore, this tranquil existence meant there was no immediate selective pressure for complex sensory organs. Imagine living in a perpetual twilight, where the ability to see a distant threat or spot a hidden meal holds little advantage. The Ediacaran organisms, as far as we can tell from their fossil record, lacked eyes. They had no sophisticated light-detecting organs, no advanced sense of smell or hearing. Their perception of the world would have been rudimentary, perhaps sensing changes in water chemistry, pressure, or light intensity in a very basic way. This meant their interactions with their environment and with each other were incredibly simple, lacking the intricate feedback loops that drive the behavior of modern animals. The environment itself, though undergoing slow changes, remained largely stable for these creatures. Oxygen levels in the oceans, while increasing after the snowball Earth events, were still relatively low compared to today's levels. This limited the metabolic rates of organisms, meaning they couldn't sustain high-energy activities like rapid movement or complex thought. Their soft, often flat or frond-like bodies were well suited to absorbing the limited oxygen available from the water. Life was a testament to efficiency within these constraints, but it was an efficiency geared towards survival in a passive, rather than an active, sense. So for hundreds of millions of years, this was the Earth's grand narrative. A vast blue canvas painted with microbial mats and the strange, unmoving forms of the Ediacaran biota. It was a world of slow currents, muted light, and an almost complete absence of the dynamic, often violent, struggles for survival that characterize much of animal life today. There was no scurrying, no burrowing, no biting, no chasing. The only sounds would have been the geological rumblings of the planet itself, the distant crash of waves on primordial shores, or the gentle swish of water. It was a serene, almost meditative existence, where the greatest challenge might have been simply holding onto the sea floor against a persistent current. This deep past, with its quiet, unhurried pace, offered little hint of the astonishing transformation that was about to occur. The stage was set. The fundamental building blocks of multicellularity had been established, but the sheer creative power of life, its capacity to invent entirely new forms and functions, remained largely untapped. The vast majority of the biological solutions that define animal life today, the ability to move with purpose, to see, to hunt, to defend, to build complex internal structures, had yet to be conceived. The tranquil, alien state of the Ediacaran world was poised on the brink of a revolution, a dramatic surge of innovation that would redefine life on Earth forever, turning a quiet blue planet into a vibrant, bustling, and often fiercely competitive arena. The peaceful eons were drawing to a close, unknowingly preparing for an explosion of complexity. Imagine the Earth's ancient oceans as we describe them. A vast, quiet realm dominated for eons by simple, single-celled microbes and the strange, soft-bodied forms of the Ediacaran biota. It was a world of gentle currents, passive existence, and a profound stillness. For billions of years, life had followed a slow, incremental path, a gradual whisper of biological change. But then, as if a switch were thrown, the volume turned up dramatically. Around 541 million years ago, our planet witnessed a biological revolution so profound it reshaped the very fabric of life, an event scientists call the Cambrian explosion. To call it an explosion might conjure images of a literal sudden blast, a cosmic detonation that scattered new life across the seas. But the reality was far more nuanced, though no less spectacular in its implications. It was an explosion of creativity, an unprecedented surge in biological innovation that played out over a geologically brief, yet immensely significant period. Within a span of roughly 20 to 25 million years, a blink of an eye when you consider Earth's 4.5 billion year history, the fossil record reveals the astonishing appearance of nearly all the fundamental body plans that define modern animal life. To grasp the scale of this time frame, consider that 20 million years is more than 300 times longer than the entire history of anatomically modern humans. Yet, in geological terms, it's remarkably swift. It's like watching a quiet, sleepy village suddenly transform into a bustling metropolis, complete with intricate infrastructure, diverse inhabitants, and complex interactions, all within a generation, from the perspective of a slow-moving mountain. Before the Cambrian, the most complex life forms were largely immobile or slow-moving, resembling quilted mats, fronds, or simple discs, passively absorbing nutrients or filter feeding. They left behind subtle impressions in the ancient mud. After this period, the rocks began to tell a story of dynamic, purposeful movement, of creatures interacting with their world and each other in entirely new ways. What exactly does it mean for nearly all modern animal phyla to appear? Think of phyla as the broadest categories in the animal kingdom, representing distinct foundational architectural designs for living creatures. They are the fundamental blueprints, the major branches on the tree of life, encompassing creatures as diverse as jellyfish, worms, mollusks, insects, and vertebrates. Before the Cambrian explosion, these blueprints were largely absent or incredibly simple. Afterwards, the fossil record suddenly showcases a dazzling array of sophisticated designs. Creatures with segmented bodies, jointed limbs, hard shells, internal skeletons, complex sensory organs, and specialized mouthparts. It was as if life had been presented with a vast empty canvas for eons, and then, in a comparatively short burst of artistic fervor, filled it with a kaleidoscope of forms. This rapid diversification introduced an entirely new suite of body plans. Imagine the ocean floor, once a relatively uniform expanse of microbial mats and the occasional gently swaying ediacaran frond, now beginning to teem with an unprecedented variety of shapes and movements. We start to see creatures that clearly possess bilateral symmetry, meaning they have a distinct left and right side, a front and a back, which is a hallmark of active directional movement. Some developed robust, multi-segmented bodies, allowing for flexibility and intricate movement across the sea floor or through the water column. Others encased themselves in protective mineralized shells, creating a defensive fortress against the emerging threats. The emergence of these new body plans was inextricably linked to the development of entirely new ecological roles. In the tranquil ediacaran world, competition was minimal, and the concept of a true predator, an organism actively hunting and consuming another, was largely absent. But with the Cambrian explosion, this changed dramatically. The oceans witnessed the rise of the first active hunters, creatures equipped with sensory organs to detect prey, and specialized appendages or mouthparts to capture and consume them. This wasn't just a new species appearing. It was the invention of a whole new way of living, a new dynamic that would forever alter the course of evolution. Alongside the predators, new forms of prey emerged, developing their own ingenious strategies for survival. Some burrowed into the soft sediments, seeking refuge beneath the surface, transforming the very structure of the seafloor by churning and aerating it. Others evolved hard, external armor, a protective exoskeleton that acted as a shield. Still others developed agile forms, allowing them to swim or dart away from danger with newfound speed. This constant interplay, this biological dance between hunter and hunted, became a powerful engine of evolution, driving further innovation and diversification. The world transformed from a passive garden into a dynamic arena of interaction. Consider the implications of these changes. Life was no longer simply absorbing nutrients from its environment. It was actively shaping it. The ocean floor, once a relatively flat, two-dimensional landscape, began to gain a third dimension as organisms burrowed deep, creating complex networks of tunnels and burrows. This bioturbation, the disturbance of sediment by living organisms, had a profound impact on the chemistry of the seafloor, influencing nutrient cycles and opening up new ecological niches for other creatures to exploit. The water column, too, became a more vibrant space, populated by a wider range of swimmers and floaters, each playing a specific part in a rapidly expanding and increasingly intricate food web. It's important to remember that this sudden appearance in the fossil record doesn't necessarily mean that these creatures instantly materialized fully formed. Evolution is a continuous process. What the fossil record reflects is the point at which these organisms developed hard parts, shells, skeletons, teeth, that could be preserved over millions of years. Their soft-bodied ancestors likely existed for some time before, but left little to no trace. The Cambrian explosion, therefore, represents a threshold, the moment when life's innovations became durable enough to be etched into the geological memory of our planet, marking a clear and dramatic shift from the faint impressions of the past to the distinct, recognizable forms of the future. The fundamental blueprints laid down during this period are truly remarkable. They represent the foundational engineering solutions that life devised to navigate the challenges and opportunities of a changing world. From the segmented body plan of an ancient arthropod, we can trace a lineage that leads to modern insects, spiders, and crustaceans. From the earliest chordates, simple creatures with a flexible rod supporting their back, we find the distant origins of fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, including ourselves. The Cambrian explosion was not just about the emergence of new species. It was about the invention of the basic body architectures, the core designs, that would underpin the vast majority of animal life for the next 500 million years, right up to the present day. It was the moment life truly began to experiment with complexity, setting the stage for all the incredible diversity we see around us. The Cambrian explosion, as we've explored, was not a literal blast, but a profound and rapid diversification of life, marking a turning point in Earth's history. Before this era, around 541 million years ago, the oceans were home to simple, soft-bodied organisms, many of them sessile or slow-moving, lacking the sophisticated defenses and sensory organs we associate with animal life today. Then, within a relatively brief geological window of perhaps 20 to 25 million years, life began to invent what we might call its fundamental engineering solutions. These were not just minor tweaks, but revolutionary biological designs that would redefine the possibilities for survival, interaction, and evolution, creating the basic blueprints for nearly all animal phyla we recognize today. Imagine a world where the only defense against being eaten was simply being too small, too well hidden, or too unappetizing. Now, picture the emergence of a hard, protective outer layer. This was one of the most significant innovations of the Cambrian period, the development of shells and exoskeletons. Suddenly, organisms like the early brachiopods, resembling modern clams but with a distinct internal anatomy, developed shells made of calcium carbonate, a common mineral. These shells offered an immediate, robust defense against newly evolving predators. They weren't just a passive shield, they were a fortress, allowing the creature inside to retreat and protect its vulnerable soft tissues. Consider the trilobites, arguably the most iconic creatures of the Cambrian seas. These ancient arthropods were among the first to develop a calcified exoskeleton, essentially an external skeleton. This was a segmented, jointed armor that covered their entire body, much like the shell of a modern crab or insect. This exoskeleton served multiple purposes. Firstly, it provided unparalleled protection from physical harm and predation. Imagine a soft-bodied worm suddenly encountering a predator with sharp teeth. It would be defenseless. A trilobite, however, could curl up, presenting its hard, spiny back to an attacker. Secondly, the exoskeleton offered structural support, allowing creatures to grow larger and move more efficiently than their entirely soft-bodied predecessors. Muscles could attach to the inside of this rigid framework, providing leverage for movement. This innovation allowed for more complex locomotion, enabling trilobites to crawl across the sea floor, burrow into sediment, or even swim short distances. The ability to shed this exoskeleton, a process called molting, also allowed for growth, though it left the animal temporarily vulnerable. Alongside these external armors, the Cambrian witnessed the beginnings of internal skeletons, particularly in the ancestors of vertebrates, known as chordates. While not as immediately apparent in the fossil record as the robust shells of trilobites, the development of a flexible rod-like structure, or notochord, provided internal support without the need for molting. This allowed for continuous growth and offered a different set of advantages, paving the way for larger, more flexible body plans that would eventually lead to fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. These foundational skeletal structures, whether internal or external, fundamentally altered the rules of engagement in the ancient oceans, shifting the balance from a world of passive existence to one of active defense and mobility. With improved body support came another groundbreaking innovation: articulated limbs. Before the Cambrian, movement was largely restricted to simple undulations, cilia-driven gliding, or passive drifting. But with the advent of segmented bodies and exoskeletons, it became possible for appendages to evolve with joints. Think of the legs of a modern lobster or the antennae of an insect. These are examples of articulated limbs. In the Cambrian, creatures like Anomalocaris, a formidable predator, possessed large, segmented appendages near its mouth, which it used to grasp and manipulate prey. Trilobites, too, developed multiple pairs of jointed legs beneath their bodies, allowing them to walk, push through sediment, and even swim. This was a radical shift from the simple, worm-like crawling of earlier organisms. Articulated limbs meant precise, controlled movement. Organisms could actively search for food, escape danger with greater speed and agility, or even burrow into the substrate to find shelter. This new level of mobility opened up entirely new ecological niches and intensified the evolutionary arms race between predators and prey. Perhaps one of the most astonishing leaps in biological engineering during the Cambrian explosion was the evolution of complex eyes. For billions of years, life had existed in a world perceived mostly through chemical signals and touch. Simple light-sensitive spots might have allowed organisms to distinguish between light and shadow, but they offered no detailed image of the surroundings. The Cambrian period changed this dramatically. Trilobites, once again, provide a stunning example. Their compound eyes were highly sophisticated, composed of numerous individual lenses, or ommatidia, often made of calcite, a mineral that is remarkably clear and durable. Each ommatidium focused light from a tiny part of the visual field, and the collective input from hundreds or even thousands of these units created a mosaic image. This allowed trilobites to perceive their environment in unprecedented detail, detecting movement, shapes, and even distances. Imagine the profound impact of this vision revolution. A predator could now see its prey from a distance, track its movements, and plan an attack. Conversely, prey could spot an approaching danger and take evasive action. This sudden ability to perceive the visual world transformed survival strategies. It put immense evolutionary pressure on both predators to develop better vision and stealth, and on prey to evolve better camouflage, faster escape mechanisms, and even their own improved sensory organs. The development of complex eyes was not merely an addition. It was a fundamental rewiring of how organisms interacted with their environment and each other, adding an entirely new dimension to the ancient food web. The final crucial piece of this biological engineering puzzle was the emergence of specialized jaws and feeding appendages. Before the Cambrian, feeding was largely passive, filter-feeding microorganisms from the water, absorbing nutrients directly through body surfaces, or scraping off microbial mats. With the rise of active predation, however, new tools were needed for capturing, processing, and consuming other organisms. Anomalocaris, with its powerful grasping appendages and a circular pineapple ring-shaped mouth lined with sharp plates, was a true apex predator of its time. It could seize prey, crush shells, and tear flesh with an efficiency previously unknown. Other creatures developed different specialized mouthparts. Some had rasping tongues, others developed biting jaws, and many evolved complex appendages around their mouths designed for sifting sediment, grasping specific food items, or even chewing. These innovations meant that energy could be extracted from food sources much more efficiently. It led to the diversification of diets, from carnivory and herbivory to scavenging and detritivory, creating intricate and dynamic food webs. The ability to actively process food fueled higher metabolic rates, which in turn supported larger body sizes, more active lifestyles, and the development of even more complex structures. These feeding mechanisms were not just about eating. They were about transforming the flow of energy through the ecosystem, making it more dynamic and productive. Taken together, these biological innovations, hard shells, exoskeletons, internal supports, articulated limbs, complex eyes, and specialized feeding apparatuses, represent a truly astounding period of biological creativity. They didn't just add new features, they fundamentally redefined the rules of life on Earth. Organisms could now move with purpose, defend themselves effectively, perceive their surroundings in detail, and actively hunt or consume their food. This burst of engineering solutions created an explosion of new ecological roles and interactions, leading to a world that was far more complex, competitive, and diverse than anything that had come before. It was the moment when life truly began to build the foundational structures that underpin the vast animal kingdom we witness today. Imagine a world where the very act of living transformed from a passive existence into a dynamic, often perilous, interplay. For eons, life on Earth had largely been a quiet affair, a slow dance of microbes and the strange soft-bodied creatures of the Ediacaran biota, drifting or clinging to the sea floor, absorbing nutrients from the water. There was little need for speed, for armor, or for keen senses in a realm where the concept of being hunted was virtually unknown. But then, as if a switch had been flicked, the Cambrian oceans began to awaken to a new, thrilling, and sometimes terrifying reality: the advent of the predator. This was not a singular event, but rather a profound shift that ignited what scientists call an evolutionary arms race. Think of it like a constant, escalating competition where every innovation by one side forces the other to adapt and innovate in turn, pushing the boundaries of what life could be. It was a relentless cycle of attack and defense, a biological dance of death and survival that fundamentally reshaped the trajectory of evolution and, in doing so, forged the incredible diversity of animal life we see today. The first active hunters were revolutionary. Consider creatures like Anomalocaris, a formidable arthropod that could grow up to 1 meter long, a truly gargantuan size for its time. Unlike the placid Ediacaran organisms, Anomalocaris was built for motion and capture. It possessed large, stalked eyes, offering a panoramic view of its surroundings, a true marvel of early vision. Picture this creature, a segmented leviathan gliding through the ancient currents, its segmented body propelling it with undulating grace. Its most striking features were 2 massive, spiny appendages extending from its head, like grasping claws. These weren't for filtering or absorbing, they were for seizing. Imagine the sudden, swift movement as Anomalocaris would dart forward, those powerful claws snapping shut on an unsuspecting trilobite or other soft-bodied prey. The very existence of such a hunter instantly introduced a new level of urgency to the lives of other organisms. Before predators, there was no fear of being eaten, no need to hide or to flee. But with hunters like Anomalocaris prowling the seafloor, the stakes were dramatically raised. Organisms that previously relied on sheer numbers or camouflage against a background of peaceful detritus now faced an existential threat. This pressure was the spark for an explosion of defensive innovations. If a creature was slow, soft, and nutrient-rich, it became a prime target. Nature, in its relentless pursuit of survival, began to favor those individuals that possessed even the slightest advantage against these new dangers. And so, the prey responded. We've previously discussed the emergence of hard parts, but now their purpose took on a new, critical dimension. The development of shells and exoskeletons, which initially might have offered structural support or mineral storage, became vital armor. Take the trilobites, for example, those iconic arthropods of the Cambrian seas. Their segmented, mineralized exoskeletons provided a robust shield against the crushing appendages of predators. Imagine a trilobite scuttling along the ancient seabed, its many legs propelling it over the uneven terrain. The shadow of an Anomalocaris passes overhead. Instantly, the trilobite might curl into a tight ball, its vulnerable underside protected by its hard, calcified backplate, effectively presenting a formidable, spiny fortress to any attacker. This simple, yet incredibly effective, maneuver was a direct answer to the threat of predation. Other creatures, like early brachiopods, developed bivalve shells that could snap shut with surprising speed, creating an almost impregnable fortress around their soft bodies. The thickness, composition, and sculpturing of these shells evolved over countless generations, each iteration a response to ever more sophisticated attacking strategies. A predator might develop stronger jaws or appendages capable of cracking thinner shells, only for the prey species to respond by evolving even thicker, more reinforced armor, perhaps with spines or ridges that made them harder to grasp or crush. This back-and-forth escalation was relentless, a constant game of one-upmanship that drove biological complexity. But armor wasn't the only solution. Speed and agility became equally crucial. For organisms without the luxury of heavy shells, the ability to escape was paramount. This led to the rapid evolution of more efficient locomotion. Limbs, which initially might have been simple protrusions, became articulated and specialized for movement. Early arthropods developed multiple pairs of legs, allowing them to scuttle across the seafloor with surprising swiftness, or even to swim short distances to evade pursuit. Imagine a small, worm-like creature sensing the vibrations of an approaching hunter through its delicate sensory bristles, and then, with a frantic flurry of its newly developed fin-like appendages, darting into a crevice or burying itself rapidly in the soft sediment. The ability to move quickly and decisively was a direct counter to the predator's ability to hunt. This demand for rapid movement also spurred the development of more sophisticated nervous systems. To coordinate multiple limbs for efficient swimming or crawling and to process sensory information quickly enough to react to a threat required a more complex brain. The simple nerve nets of earlier sessile creatures gave way to centralized nervous systems, allowing for faster processing and more refined motor control. This was a monumental leap, enabling organisms to not just react, but to anticipate and plan, however rudimentary those plans might have been. The evolutionary arms race also profoundly impacted the development of sensory organs. If a predator evolved better eyes to spot prey from a distance, then prey, in turn, needed better eyes to spot the predator coming. We've already touched upon the compound eyes of trilobites, which were remarkably advanced for their time. These multifaceted eyes, composed of hundreds or even thousands of individual lenses, offered a wide field of view and excellent motion detection. Imagine the world through a trilobite's eyes, a mosaic of movement and light, instantly alerting it to the subtle shift in water currents or the fleeting shadow of a hunter. This ability to see danger or opportunity was a game changer. Beyond vision, other senses also sharpened. Chemoreception, the ability to smell or taste chemicals in the water, became more refined. Predators could track prey by detecting their chemical trails, while prey could detect the presence of predators by the subtle chemical cues they emitted. Vibrational sensors, sensitive to disturbances in the water or substrate, also became more acute. A slight tremor in the sea floor caused by a predator's approach could trigger an immediate evasive response in a small, soft-bodied organism. The ancient oceans, once a world of gentle flows and subtle chemical gradients, now buzzed with a cacophony of sensory information, a constant exchange of signals between hunter and hunted. This escalating competition was not a static back and forth, but a dynamic, ever-tightening spiral of innovation. A predator that developed a new way to pierce armor would select for prey with even harder, more complex armor. This, in turn, would push the predator to evolve stronger claws, or perhaps develop a completely new hunting strategy, like ambushing or burrowing to surprise hidden prey. Each step forward by one side created a new challenge for the other, accelerating the pace of evolution and driving an unprecedented diversification of life forms and body plans. It was a period of intense creative pressure, where the very act of survival demanded constant biological innovation. Consider the intricate food webs that began to form. Before this arms race, food webs were relatively simple, largely based on microbial mats and passive filter feeding. But with the advent of active predation, the entire ecological structure became vastly more complex. There were primary consumers grazing on algae and detritus, secondary consumers hunting the grazers, and even tertiary consumers preying on other predators. This tiered system created a cascading effect, where changes at one level reverberated throughout the entire ecosystem, further driving diversity and specialization. Each new niche, each new feeding strategy, represented another branch on the rapidly expanding tree of life. The emergence of active hunting and the subsequent defensive adaptations profoundly influenced the very structure of marine communities. No longer were the oceans dominated by flat, mat-like organisms. Instead, life began to explore all three dimensions. Organisms burrowed into the sediment to escape, creating complex tunnel systems that aerated the sea floor. Others developed the ability to swim freely in the water column, escaping the bottom-dwelling predators. The seafloor itself became a dynamic battleground, churned and reworked by burrowing animals, providing new habitats and new challenges. This period, though geologically sudden, still unfolded over millions of years, an immense span of time during which countless generations lived and died, each subtly refined by the relentless pressure of selection. The Cambrian explosion was not a single event, but a continuous series of micro-evolutionary steps, each one a response to the ever-changing challenges of a world increasingly shaped by the drama of the predator-prey relationship. It was in this crucible of competition that life truly began to invent its most ingenious engineering solutions, laying down the foundational blueprints for the incredible variety of animal life that would follow. The quiet eons were over. The age of dynamic, interacting, and often dangerous life had begun, while the relentless pressure of an evolutionary arms race undoubtedly fueled much of the Cambrian diversification, pushing creatures to develop armor, speed, and sharper senses. This intense competition didn't happen in a vacuum. The stage for such an extraordinary burst of biological innovation had to be set by profound shifts in the Earth's environment and the very genetic architecture of life itself. Imagine trying to build a complex machine without enough raw materials or the right blueprints. Even with the strongest motivation, progress would be limited. The Cambrian explosion was similarly enabled by two powerful underlying forces: a dramatic increase in the planet's oxygen supply and the evolution of a sophisticated genetic toolkit. For billions of years before the Cambrian, Earth had experienced periods of extreme environmental volatility. Among the most dramatic were the snowball Earth glaciations, a series of events occurring between about 720 and 635 million years ago, long before the Cambrian. During these epochs, our planet was largely encased in ice, stretching from the poles almost to the equator, presenting a desolate, alien landscape. When these massive glaciers finally retreated, they left behind a profoundly altered world. The grinding action of these colossal ice sheets had pulverized vast quantities of rock, releasing an unprecedented influx of vital nutrients like phosphorus and iron into the newly thawed oceans. These nutrient-rich waters became a fertile breeding ground for single-celled photosynthetic organisms such as cyanobacteria and early algae, which thrive on sunlight and these dissolved minerals. This explosion of microscopic life initiated a cascade of events that dramatically reshaped Earth's atmosphere and oceans. As these tiny organisms flourished in the sunlit surface waters, they continuously performed photosynthesis, a process that consumes carbon dioxide and releases oxygen as a byproduct. Imagine vast, invisible factories endlessly churning out the gas essential for complex life. When these photosynthetic organisms died, their remains settled to the ocean floor. Under normal conditions, bacteria would decompose this organic matter, consuming oxygen in the process. However, during this post-glacial period, the sheer volume of organic material, combined with specific oceanographic conditions, led to much of it being buried and preserved in sediments, effectively locking away carbon and preventing its decomposition. This burial meant that the oxygen these organisms produced wasn't immediately reabsorbed, leading to a significant net accumulation of free oxygen in both the oceans and the atmosphere. The increase in oxygen levels was not merely a subtle shift. It was a fundamental game changer for life. For the vast majority of Earth's history, oxygen had been scarce, restricting organisms to less efficient, anaerobic forms of metabolism, which means they could generate energy without oxygen. These metabolic pathways yield far less energy, making it difficult for organisms to grow large, move quickly, or develop complex tissues. Think of it like trying to power a modern city with a few small, inefficient generators. The Ediacaran biota, those strange, quilted forms that preceded the Cambrian animals, were largely sessile or slow-moving, absorbing nutrients directly through their skin. Their thin, broad body plans were perfectly adapted for a low-oxygen world, maximizing surface area for diffusion, but they were limited in their potential for activity and internal complexity. With significantly elevated oxygen levels, life could finally harness the power of aerobic respiration. This oxygen-dependent process is incredibly efficient, producing many times more energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, from the same amount of food. This surge of available energy was like upgrading from those small generators to a massive, highly efficient power plant. It provided the necessary fuel for organisms to grow substantially larger, to develop powerful muscles for active movement, and to support the metabolically demanding structures of complex nervous systems and sophisticated sensory organs such as eyes. The energy constraint that had kept life small, simple, and slow for eons was finally lifted, paving the way for the dynamic, diverse forms that would soon populate the Cambrian seas. This oxygenation of the planet was a critical prerequisite, a cosmic breath of fresh air that invigorated life and allowed it to experiment with new, more energetic designs. But even with abundant oxygen providing the fuel, life still needed the blueprints and tools to construct these new, complex body plans. This is where the evolution of what scientists call Choc's genes comes into play. Imagine you are an architect designing a building. You don't individually draw every single brick or pipe. Instead, you have a master blueprint that dictates the overall structure, where the walls go, where the rooms are, and how they connect. HX genes are precisely like these master blueprints for animal bodies. They are a family of regulatory genes that essentially act as an organism's chief architects, orchestrating the development of body structures along the main head-to-tail axis. They don't build the individual cells or tissues themselves, but rather they tell other genes when and where to turn on or off during embryonic development, thereby determining the identity of each body segment. In simpler terms, a specific Hox gene might say, "This segment here will develop into a head with antennae and eyes," while another might declare, "This segment will form a thorax with legs," and yet another, "This section will be an abdomen." What is truly remarkable is that these HOX genes are often arranged on the chromosome in the same linear order as the body parts they control, a phenomenon known as collinearity. This means the gene at one end of the Hox cluster might control head development, while the gene at the other end controls tail development, with all the segments in between falling into place in a precise sequence. Early, simpler animals had only a few HX genes, but through a process known as gene duplication, where an entire gene or even a whole set of genes gets accidentally copied during reproduction, the number of HOX genes gradually increased over evolutionary time. This was a pivotal moment. Imagine an architect who initially has only a few basic blueprint templates. If they suddenly acquire more templates, or even copies of existing ones that can then be slightly altered, their design possibilities expand enormously. With a greater number of HOX genes, life gained a much richer genetic toolkit. It allowed for greater flexibility and modularity in body plan construction. Small changes in the expression of these master control genes, perhaps a gene turning on earlier, or in a slightly different location, or for a longer duration, could lead to dramatic yet coordinated changes in an organism's overall form. This expanded HOX gene toolkit provided the biological raw material for the rapid generation of diverse and complex forms observed during the Cambrian explosion. It meant that evolution didn't have to invent entirely new genes for every single new structure. Instead, it could tinker with the existing master control genes, subtly shifting their instructions to create novel arrangements of segments, new types of appendages, or entirely different body organizations. This genetic plasticity allowed for an explosion of experimental body plans, giving rise to the fundamental animal phyla we recognize today, from the segmented bodies of arthropods to the radial symmetry of echinoderms, all originating from variations on these ancient genetic blueprints. The evolution of Hox genes was not just an addition, it was an amplification of life's creative potential, providing the underlying code for biological innovation. It is crucial to understand that these factors, increased oxygen, the genetic innovations of HOX genes, and the ecological pressures of the predator-prey arms race, did not operate in isolation. Rather, they formed a complex, interwoven web of cause and effect, each amplifying and influencing the others. The higher oxygen levels provided the metabolic capacity for larger, more active bodies, which in turn made complex structures like eyes and limbs energetically feasible. These complex structures, when combined with the flexibility offered by HOX genes, allowed for the rapid development of diverse body plans capable of exploiting new ecological niches and engaging in the escalating arms race. The arms race itself then provided strong selective pressure for even more sophisticated sensory organs, faster movement, and stronger defenses, continuously pushing the boundaries of what life could achieve. Scientists today continue to debate the exact sequence and relative importance of these triggers. Was the rise in oxygen the primary catalyst, enabling the subsequent evolution of complex genes and body plans? Or did the genetic innovations, such as HOX gene duplications, precede the major oxygenation events, simply waiting for the environment to catch up and provide the necessary energy? It's likely a feedback loop, where each factor contributed to and accelerated the others in a dynamic interplay. There is no single, simple answer, no solitary magic bullet that explains the Cambrian explosion. Instead, it was a confluence of environmental readiness, genetic innovation, and ecological opportunity, all converging at a critical juncture in Earth's history to ignite life's most dramatic surge of creative power. This period showcases not just the appearance of new species, but the very invention of life's fundamental engineering solutions, blueprints that continue to guide the vast diversity of animal life across our planet today. Imagine, for a moment, looking out over the Earth today, from the smallest nematode wriggling in the soil to the largest blue whale navigating the oceans, from the intricate dance of an ant colony to the majestic flight of an eagle. Life presents an astonishing tapestry of forms, behaviors, and adaptations. Every creature, in its own unique way, represents a solution to the fundamental challenges of survival. How to move, how to eat, how to sense the world, and how to protect oneself. What if we told you that the foundational blueprints for almost all of these solutions were first sketched out, tested, and perfected in a relatively brief window of time, hundreds of millions of years ago? The Cambrian explosion, as we've explored, was not an event of destruction, but one of boundless creation. It was far more than simply the appearance of new species, which happens constantly throughout geological time. Instead, it was the moment when life truly began to invent its fundamental engineering solutions, the basic designs, mechanisms, and strategies that underpin the vast diversity of animal life we observe today. Think of it as the grand opening of an evolutionary workshop, where nature experimented with materials, structures, and systems, laying down the core designs that would prove endlessly adaptable and resilient for the next 500 million years. These were not mere tweaks to existing forms. They were radical innovations that redefined what it meant to be an animal. Consider the hard parts, for instance. Before the Cambrian, life was predominantly soft, leaving little trace in the fossil record beyond impressions and carbon films. Then, suddenly, shells, plates, and exoskeletons appeared. These weren't just decorative additions, they were revolutionary. A hard shell provided defense against the newly emerging predators, a sturdy anchor for muscles, and protection against environmental stresses. The brachiopods, for example, simple filter-feeding marine animals with 2 hinged shells, appeared in the Cambrian and still thrive in some parts of the world today, a testament to the enduring success of their basic design. Similarly, the trilobites, with their segmented, mineralized exoskeletons, were among the most successful creatures of their time, dominating the Cambrian seas and persisting for nearly 300 million years. Their segmented bodies and jointed limbs were early versions of the same principles that allow insects to walk, crabs to scuttle, and lobsters to swim today. These early suits of armor were a critical innovation, fundamentally changing the interaction between organisms and their environment, and between predator and prey. Then there were the limbs. The ability to move purposefully and actively was another game changer. Imagine a world where most creatures simply drifted or slowly crept along the seafloor. The development of articulated limbs, like those seen on early arthropods, allowed for directed movement, enabling organisms to hunt, to escape, to burrow, and to explore their surroundings with unprecedented efficiency. These early jointed appendages were the predecessors to the myriad forms of locomotion we see today. The powerful legs of a cheetah, the delicate wings of a butterfly, the agile fins of a fish, and even our own limbs. The underlying genetic programming and structural principles for these complex moving parts were established in the Cambrian, providing a robust framework that evolution could then modify for specific purposes. And what about sight? The emergence of complex eyes, particularly the compound eyes of trilobites, was a sensory revolution. Before this, creatures likely perceived only rudimentary light and shadow. With true vision, a whole new dimension of perception opened up. Predators could actively track prey, and prey could spot danger from a distance, initiating the rapid escalation of the evolutionary arms race we discussed earlier. The ability to see transformed ecological interactions, making them dynamic and complex. The basic principles of light detection and image formation, though vastly refined over millions of years, trace their origins back to these early visual systems. From the simple eye spots of a flatworm to the sophisticated camera eyes of an octopus or a human, the fundamental concept of using light to interpret the world began its complex journey during this pivotal period. These aren't just isolated inventions, they are integrated systems. The development of specialized feeding appendages, such as the powerful grasping claws of Anomalocaris, allowed for active predation, enabling creatures to rip apart and consume other organisms. This shift from passive filter feeding or absorption to active hunting created entirely new ecological roles and food webs, making the ocean a far more dynamic and competitive place. The diverse forms of mouths, teeth, beaks, and filtering structures seen in animals today, from the baleen plates of whales to the fangs of a snake, all spring from this initial burst of innovation in how organisms acquire their sustenance. The basic toolkit for processing food, absorbing nutrients, and eliminating waste while evolving endlessly, was largely assembled during this time. The body plans and basic biological features established during the Cambrian explosion truly underpin the vast diversity of animals we see across Earth's ecosystems. When scientists classify animals into phyla, the broadest categories of animal life, representing distinct fundamental body plans, they are essentially recognizing these ancient blueprints. Almost all of the approximately 35 existing animal phyla, from arthropoda, insects, crustaceans, spiders, to chordata, vertebrates, including humans, to mollusca, snails, clams, octopuses, have their earliest recognizable representatives appearing in the Cambrian fossil record. This means that the basic architectural designs for nearly every type of animal on Earth were laid down in this remarkably brief geological interval. Consider the phylum Arthropoda, which includes an immense variety of creatures from the smallest mites to the largest crabs. Their defining features, a segmented body, an exoskeleton, and jointed appendages, were perfected in the Cambrian with creatures like the trilobites. Today, these features are found in everything from a buzzing bee to a scurrying centipede. Or take the chordates, our own lineage, which includes all vertebrates. While early Cambrian chordates like Pikaia might not look much like us, they possessed a flexible rod called a notochord, a dorsal nerve cord, and gill slits, the fundamental characteristics that would eventually lead to the development of backbones, complex brains, and lungs in fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. These core innovations were not merely options. They were the winning designs that proved robust enough to be carried forward through hundreds of millions of years of evolution, adapting to countless environmental changes and giving rise to an unimaginable array of life forms. Understanding this ancient burst of creativity helps us appreciate the profound resilience and adaptability of life itself. The planet before the Cambrian was a dramatically different place, recovering from vast snowball Earth glaciations and slowly accumulating oxygen. life not only survived these massive environmental shifts, but capitalized on them, using the increased energy availability and new ecological spaces to innovate. This period showcases life's incredible capacity to respond to challenges, to push the boundaries of what is possible, and to bounce back with renewed vigor after periods of global stress. It's a powerful reminder that evolution is not a static process, but a dynamic, ever-unfolding story of invention and reinvention. The Cambrian explosion also offers crucial insights into the broader evolutionary processes that continue to shape the planet. It's a prime example of what scientists call adaptive radiation, where a rapid diversification of life forms occurs from a common ancestor, filling newly available ecological niches. The sudden appearance of predators and the subsequent arms race demonstrate how intense selective pressures can drive rapid and complex evolutionary change. Furthermore, the role of regulatory genes, like the HOX genes we discussed, highlights how small changes in genetic master switches can lead to massive differences in body plans, providing a powerful mechanism for rapid morphological innovation. It shows us that evolution isn't always a slow, gradual crawl. Sometimes it leaps forward in bursts of intense creativity, laying down the groundwork for future diversification. The legacy of the Cambrian explosion is not confined to the fossil record. It is alive all around us. Every animal you encounter, from the tiniest ant to the most enormous elephant, carries within its structure and genetic code echoes of those ancient Cambrian innovations. The fundamental ways in which animals move, sense, feed, and protect themselves were largely established during that extraordinary period. It reminds us of life's profound and continuous capacity for innovation, a capacity that didn't end 500 million years ago, but continues to shape organisms today, albeit often through more subtle refinements of those ancient blueprints. The story of the Cambrian explosion is a testament to the fact that our planet is not merely a stage upon which life performs, but an active participant in life's drama, providing the conditions and challenges that spur evolution onward. From a quiet, microbe-dominated world through a period of intense geological and atmospheric change, Earth witnessed a surge of creativity that transformed its oceans into a vibrant, complex ecosystem. The basic designs that emerged from this ancient burst of innovation were so successful, so versatile, that they have persisted, adapted, and diversified into the breathtaking array of animals that populate our world today. It is a story of beginnings, of fundamental inventions, and of the enduring power of life to find new ways to thrive. It leaves us with a sense of wonder, reflecting on the deep evolutionary connections that bind all living things, and the extraordinary journey life has taken on this pale blue dot we call home. The story of life on Earth is one of continuous transformation, and the Cambrian explosion stands as a monumental testament to life's dynamic, inventive power, a profound legacy that continues to unfold even now.